this morning is another mandatory safety meeting that we're going to start soon. Today's code of conduct item is work in an environmentally conscientious manner. Thanks, Matt. We've had 101 days without a recordable injury, and Governor Scott in the past few days has suspended non-essential travel to basically anywhere on the map. Everything turned red except for Vermont. So any questions with that, please talk to Matt. Matt's got a pretty good handle on it, and he's been following this closely for the past several days. I know that Ken will mention a little bit later a few more details on our situation right now dealing with COVID-19. Probably like to get started with our training right off. Last week, Matt, if you can get that started. Last week we had our part 1 of her anti-harassment training. I think it was a good basis of understanding for everyone as far as our expectations corporately, and also the morals and the integrity that's involved in our awareness for and what to do. This next part also being mandatory. If you didn't see the first part, Matt will help you to view that and certify to Matt that we've seen it. The second part, I think, is going to be a little bit more in depth. It's going to build on the first, and I'd like to introduce Susan Graham from a partner at NFP, who is going to get started here with part 2 of the anti-harassment training. So,
all right.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for the intro. So I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. Just my typical disclaimer that I am not an attorney, so I'm not giving legal advice. I was hoping for some questions from last week, but apparently we didn't get any. But just so that you know, if you do have questions on this, let Matt or Ben know after the presentation, and they will be conglomerating them and presenting to me at the beginning of next week's session. So just want to let you know I am available to answer questions for you. So we're going to focus a little bit more today on what's actually considered illegal workplace harassment. And you'll see that the line between what's illegal and what's just plain inappropriate isn't really clear. It can get kind of fuzzy. So we're going to be talking about that in a little bit more detail. So to actually define what illegal harassment is, it's unwelcome conduct, and it has to be based on a protected status. So for those of you who were here last week, if you remember those circles that were on that one slide of all of those different protected statuses, the harassment has to be geared towards a member of one of those protected statuses. It also has to meet a threshold that's called severe and pervasive. And it has to be severe and pervasive enough that it actually creates what's considered an intimidating, a hostile, or an abusive work environment, which isn't always abundantly clear. But these are just some examples of actions and words in the workplace that would be considered harassing. What a joke that you're sick all the time. What's your problem anyway? As we talked about last week, disability is a protected class. There could be someone that you're joking around with who actually does have some sort of a disability, and ECI is making a reasonable accommodation for them so that maybe they're missing some work time. And you don't know that because that's confidential information. I wonder if the Muslim guy is going to want to pray at the work site. That one's pretty obvious. Hey, thanks, baby. I think any kind of a terminology like baby, babe, hun, sweetheart, and I know sometimes it's said very innocently, but still, it's the kind of language that, 10, 15, 20 years ago was thrown around in the workplace quite a bit. And now it has definitely become off limits. Women don't have what it takes to do this job. We talked last week about how top heavy you are on men at ECI. And I think sometimes it's easy to just joke around with some of your female coworkers about things like this. And, in reality, maybe they are taking it as lighthearted and it's not bothering them. But then again, maybe it is. You don't always know. You need to retire, old man, you're old school. Again, it could be innocent bantering, but it could also cross that threshold if it isn't well received on the other end. And you just don't always know how well received it is, because not everybody is comfortable coming out and saying, hey, you know what, that's enough. I'm really tired of hearing this. And the harassing behavior can take place really almost in any different format. It can take place verbally, obviously when you're talking to people, when you're talking to them on the phone, if you're on a Zoom call or whatever this platform is we're using, GoToMeeting, it can take place there. So much of what we do in the workplace now is written. You've got a lot of emails and texting going on back and forth. You've even got social media posts on your own social media. And yes, harassment, workplace harassment can take place over your personal social media. Body language, if we go back a minute to that picture, right? The body language here. Look at the look on her face. She doesn't look like she's exactly welcoming that hand on her shoulder, right? So, you have to be perceptive of how other people around you, what their body language is. And you also have to be careful of what your body language is around them. That kind of suggestive glance to someone, that could be considered harassing behavior. And, typically you think of harassment as sexual harassment, and a male is harassing a female. But in reality, it can be any interaction that takes place in the workplace. And it doesn't even have to be employee to employee. As we talked about a little bit last week, it can be employee to client, employee to vendor, client to employee, vendor to employee. And, it can also be a female to male, or a female to female, or a male to male interaction. So the most common is that you think of, again, is the sexual harassment, the male to female, but it can really be anybody who communicates in the workplace. And most commonly, again, you're thinking that it can happen in the office, it can happen at a work site, but it can also happen off-site. It can happen at company-sponsored events, for example, a company picnic or a holiday party. It can absolutely happen on your own time, off-site, at social gatherings. If it's between two employees and there's harassing behavior going on, it doesn't matter if it's happening on their own time and it's when people are gathering after work for a happy hour. It can happen, of course, while you're traveling for work. Surfing the web or viewing social media. Even if you're viewing social media on your own phone, or you're looking at something on your own phone, if you're doing it in the workplace and it's something that's offensive and it's interfering with other people doing their work, then yeah, that is considered illegal workplace harassment. And of course, it can happen on any kind of an online portal nowadays, which is something that, it unbelievably does happen. So again, it has to be based on one of those protected statuses, and examples of what could potentially be illegal behavior would be, derogatory statements, some of the examples we gave before, any kind of jokes, ridicule, anything that's slanderous to one of those protected classes, offensive text or pictures. Again, those of you who are over the age of 50 in the workplace, you have probably seen some pretty offensive things hanging up on people's office walls and cubicles. It used to be acceptable. It's not anymore. Any kind of intimidating behavior, and basically anything that would interfere with somebody doing their job. So it could be bantering back and forth between two coworkers, and there's a third person who overhears it, and it's disrupting them. It's disrupting, it's offensive. That could be considered illegal harassment. Again, if it's based on one of those protected statuses. Obviously, unwelcome sexual behavior, that kind of goes without say, and any kind of physical assaults or threats. Pretty common sense there. So what it doesn't include, again, unless it's based on one of those protected statuses, it doesn't include well, my boss is really looking over my shoulder all the time. That's not considered illegal workplace harassment. I think that term harassment gets thrown around a lot, but you have to remember that unless it's based on one of those protected statuses, it's not actual illegal harassment. It could absolutely be inappropriate, but it's not necessarily illegal. So just because your supervisor is kind of riding you to get a job done, that doesn't mean that that's harassment. Disagreement with your coworker or remarks that somebody else says to you that you don't necessarily agree with. That's not harassment. Somebody giving you some sort of negative feedback or criticism, again, not harassment, unless you are being singled out because you're a member of a protected class. So say, for example, you've got a supervisor who is only closely supervising those that in the workplace that are people of color. That would definitely be a problem. Any kind of unflattering comments, if somebody comes up to you and says, you are having a really bad hair day, that's not illegal. It might not be appropriate. It might just be a joke, but it certainly does not rise to that level of being illegal because there's no protected status there. We all have bad hair days. So let's dig a little bit deeper into what sexual harassment actually is. This is the one that gets so much attention in the press, particularly following some really, really high profile cases that kind of spurred on the Me Too movement. So you've got two different kinds of sexual harassment. You've got quid pro quo. That's a term that we've all become quite familiar with. And basically what that means is this for that. So it means that someone in the workplace is saying, I'm going to give you a particular work benefit if you submit to my unwelcome sexual conduct. So that one is really pretty clear cut. But the hostile work environment is where it starts getting kind of fuzzy, because hostile work environment means that there's unwelcome sexual conduct, and that unwelcome conduct or those unwelcome comments have to unreasonably interfere with a person's work or create an offensive, intimidating work environment. Well, what does all of that mean? So in order to be considered a hostile work environment, the conduct has to be severe, which we all know is defined as very great or intense. It also has to be pervasive. So it needs to really exist in the essence of the workplace. So you think that that's a pretty high standard, but then you go on to see what severe and pervasive means, and it has to be severe and pervasive enough that a reasonable person in the employee's position would have felt that it made the work environment hostile or abusive. Well, what's the definition of a reasonable person, right? I think I'm a reasonable person. You probably think you're a reasonable person, but our two thresholds for what's appropriate could be very, very different. So it's really not at all clear, because we don't really know what a reasonable person is, right? So you can see how it's not abundantly clear what would be considered a hostile work environment, and everybody's perceptions are going to be a little bit different. So just to give you some examples of what could turn into a hostile work environment, if you've got an employee who is pretty persistently sharing some sort of inappropriate sexually oriented jokes. Again, you notice the word continuously. One joke, one off-color joke, probably wouldn't rise to the threshold of illegal. That doesn't mean that it's appropriate in your workplace, however, because ECI's threshold is well below what would qualify as illegal. Here's an example of your quid pro quo. I'll give you a pay raise if you engage in a sexual relationship with me. Again, pretty cut and dry. Another quid pro quo, if you've got an employee who isn't picked for a supervisory position because they're not going to sleep with their manager. Here we get more into that threshold again. The employee gives another employee an unwelcome pat on the butt for good luck in a new position. Generally touching in the workplace, think back to that picture with the hand on the shoulder, and the look on that employee's face. Any kind of touching in the workplace nowadays, other than what we used to do, the handshake, right, which none of us are doing right now, it's generally not acceptable, and I wouldn't try it because it's not going to be very well received. So I would say that would be one of those actions that shouldn't happen in the workplace anymore. Again, the employee sharing a sexually explicit photo on their phone. So they don't even have to be sharing it with you as the employee. They could be sharing it with another employee, but you're there working right next to them. You hear what's going on. You see what's going on. It's making you uncomfortable. That could be, that would definitely be a hostile work environment. And it doesn't need to be two employees. It can be an employee that works for a different company, but they happen to be there on your work site. So maybe you've got an example would be somebody who works for someone other than ECI, but they are there, they're on your work site, and they're constantly berating one of your coworkers because of their sexual orientation. That would definitely be a hostile work environment, even though the person who is doing the harassing isn't an ECI employee. It's happening in the workplace. So when we talk about what Vermont says is illegal, and what Vermont says that employers need to do, I just wanted to go over that because Vermont is fairly stringent compared to other states. Some states really don't even have their own sexual harassment laws. They just follow the federal laws. Vermont does take it a step further, and we are more stringent here. So Vermont says that all employers have to be distributing a policy statement prohibiting sexual harassment to new employees when they're hired. And it's in the ECI handbook. I have recommended that actually be pulled out and be distributed to all new employees and gone over as part of their onboarding process. So everybody's abundantly clear of what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable and what their rights are and what they need to do if they want to report some sort of harassing behavior. Vermont also says that you do have to give employees information on how to report internally and explain their external rights. And what that means is you'll see when your new policy comes out that it talks about this is who you go to if you have a complaint internally, but if for some reason you want to take it outside of the organization, it's perfectly within your rights. You always want to resolve things internally because usually that's the most effective way of getting things done, right? You talk to somebody, you work it through, you bring it to Ben or Matt's attention, it gets worked out internally. But you do have a right to go to the state attorney general's office or to the federal EEOC agency if you feel that the situation warrants it. Vermont says that employers have to ensure a timely and confidential investigation process. The confidentiality is within reason. So in other words, if you have a situation going on and you go to Matt and you say, I'm really feeling uncomfortable, I feel like I'm being harassed, but I don't want anybody to know about this. I want to keep it confidential. Reality is if it's happening to you, it's probably happening to other employees as well. And Vermont says that ECI as an employer is going to need to follow up on your complaint, and they're going to do everything that they can to keep it confidential, but they can't guarantee absolute confidentiality because things in the course of an investigation, information does get out. So it's not guaranteed, but they're going to do everything that they can to keep it confidential. Vermont also says that employers have to be committed to taking action against employees who engage in sexual harassment or supervisors that allow the behavior. So supervisors really can't just be turning their back and saying, oh, I don't think that really warrants my interaction here. I'm just going to look the other way and hope that it doesn't happen again. That's not okay. In the state of Vermont, supervisors cannot allow this behavior to continue. If they know about it, they need to be taking action. It also says that you need to, as part of your policy, prohibit retaliation against employees who report harassment or against employees who participate in investigation. So if you as an employee are ever asked to participate in investigation, to give information about what you might know about a particular workplace situation, you need to be it's good to know that you are protected from any kind of retaliatory action in the workplace. And there's initial and annual training that's recommended by the state of Vermont, but it's not mandated. So ECI isn't doing these morning trainings because the state of Vermont says that they have to. They're doing it because they're really committed to making sure that everybody's workplace is free from that harassing behavior. So in 2018, just so that you know, we've discussed this already, those protections have been extended to anybody that a worker interacts with in the workplace. So that would be anybody who's hired to perform work or services, that would be your vendors, or anybody else from other companies that might be working on your work site, anybody who might be considered an independent contractor. They all fall under the umbrella of your anti-harassment policy. So just to talk a little bit more about what retaliation is, again, it can be, retaliation can happen against anybody who has come forward with any kind of a complaint, or anybody who has participated in a harassment investigation. And retaliation would be basically any kind of adverse action towards an employee who is in one of those situations. And that could include, poor performance reviews, singling them out for closer work scrutiny, as we talked a little bit about before, not giving somebody a promotion. It could be a whole range of issues, and that's not okay. It is illegal. It is prohibited under ECI's policy. So again, you don't have to worry about any kind of retaliation if you do feel that you need to come forward with the situation. I think we kind of, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through these in too much. I already mentioned them a couple of minutes ago. What I did want to mention here, and this is a kind of an important piece, is again, when you get that harassment policy, the ECI's policy specifically says that the same rules for the sexual harassment policy also apply to all forms of discriminatory harassment. So again, think of what discriminatory harassment is. It's harassment in the workplace that is geared towards one of those protected classes. So all the rules that we just talked about for sexual harassment, the no retaliation, this is how you report a scenario. We are going to investigate it promptly. You are entitled to a prompt investigation. That applies for any kind of harassing behavior that's taking in the workplace, not just sexual harassment. So with that, if you have questions, as I mentioned earlier, feel free to send them to Matt or to Ben, and next week, I'd be happy to go over them with you. I'm hoping to get a few questions next week since I didn't get any this week.
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan.
All right, you're welcome. I'm going to sign off. Bye, everybody. I'll see you next Friday.
Okay, see you, Susan. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to show my screen here.
Okay. I'm going to mute.
Okay, does that work? Everyone see that? Do you guys see it? See my screen? Okay.
Yep, we got it. We got it, Ken.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. So let's see, we got a lot of announcements here, starting with the health and dental insurance. We have an online meeting on Monday, the 16th. That's this coming Monday at 5:30. So after work, topics include the 2021 insurance program, and I got a sneak peek here. There's no rate increases, at least to the employee, no changes in coverage, and no deductible changes to the employees. So all great news for everybody in the program. And also for anyone interested in the program, open enrollment time, which ends November 30th, will be discussed at the meeting. So if you're interested, then you should definitely attend, or if not, if anyone can attend this, we can certainly help you out and assist you. The other item here that we will be talking about is life and disability insurance. The company has a short-term disability and life insurance on everyone, but the same programs allow for the employees to participate with an expanded coverage. So add an employee option and employee paid premiums. And then we have this document link here for the summary. So I believe that probably is being sent out, but also it is summarized here on this link, the PDF. That's will be the basis of the meeting and the discussion. So if you're not able to attend, and you don't need to, then just at least review the summary, and hopefully you'll be there and have questions. And it's a go-to meeting, just like we're doing here, a go-to training. So all you do is click it on and go. And we're also doing it at the 5:30 time. So spouses or what other family members that might need to or want to attend are welcome to. So also, and that's that part, the next announcement is to look for a routine 401k mailing later this week, and check with Ursula if you have any questions. And colder weather is around the corner, so start treating fuel and winterizing pumps. I think winter is kind of coming back after that Indian summer. It was great. So the COVID policies here, I just got a special note in red here. Vermont is experiencing or expecting a significant increase, and actually experiencing and expecting a further significant increase, I could almost say, in the COVID infections in the coming weeks. And we need to be extra diligent to keep safe and to prevent a condition that requires us to shut down. Remember the spring? Well, that was a long time of not a lot of things going on anywhere in our life, so we don't want to go back to that. So let's make sure we do as much social distancing and face coverings. We're going to be really looking for enforcing the face coverings and everything we can do to prevent a problem from happening here, because we know it's going to get real bad in Vermont too. So let's be careful. And for this week, we are profiling the Shelburne Farms water system improvements that's in Shelburne, out near the Shelburne Point. And ECI is contracted. Oh man, I made a mistake there. Shelburne Farms, not Shelburne Museum. I had Shelburne Museum on my mind because that's what I have for an archive photo. So to perform the HDD work and cement lining of an existing 8-inch cast iron water main. And the HDD work included supply and installation of a 10-inch by 1,160 foot long section of DR11 HDPE pipe to feed the active dairy barn over there. It's quite a barn. If you've never been there, you should go check it out sometime. It was drilled with our Ditch Witch AT100, and the work included testing chlorination and valving, which is in tie-ins, which will begin next week. So here's a little site plan image, Google image, that shows the connection we made. So it's quite a large property, as you can see from the scale of this. And here we are. I believe the drill work was just finished up. This was late in the afternoon, probably a few weeks ago. The leaves are still on the trees. Looks nice out there. This is around the farm area, and I think that's one of the temporary bypass lines that's running up the page. And then the other part of the work was cement lining, and the lining was done on 3,900 feet of existing 8-inch cast iron pipe. The original pipe was installed by hand in the late 1800s. So ECI participated or subcontracted with Michael's Pipeline Services for the lining portion of this work, and we provided support to them, including the bypass piping that included 7 connection points, lining preparing the access pits, or lining access pits, but preparing the lining access pits. And we didn't line the access pits. And the access to all locations for both Michael's and ECI's work. And it was really impressive how we were well prepared and organized, so that Michael's work was done 4 days earlier than anticipated, because they could just jump from one access point to the other and get it done real fast. So this is the site plan for that work. It's 3,900 feet. Like I said, the farm area where we did the HDD is kind of in the center of the page. It's really hard to see on this image. Here we can see some of the pipe. It considered a tuberculosis type condition where the the iron reacts with some biological condition within the water, so it creates this caking, and it's not a calcification type thing, but it's more of a rust and iron condition, or rust oxide. And it constricts, obviously, the pipe, and it makes for kind of messy water. And they clean it out with this device and scrape it right out. They just pull it through with a cable, and then it just turns to this really yucky mess. But in the end, well, after they cement line it, it looks good, looks great. So that kind of shows you why all the modern ductile iron pipe is cement lined. Otherwise, you'd have that problem that they had out there. And then in the end, after we did Michaels did the work, and we prepared to put it back together to splice that opening we made in the pipes. So Shelburne Farms is a nonprofit organization. If you've never been there, it's a great place to check out, bring the family, bring the kids especially. Their mission is to inspire and cultivate learning for a sustainable future. And that means learning that helps students build a healthy future of their communities and planet based on Abenaki land. And the home campus is 1,400 acres out there, with a working farm, forest, and natural historic landmark. It's also apparently a Frederick Law Olmsted design property or landscaping. I mean, he was a famous person who did like New York Central Park and all that. So it's a pretty impressive place. I encourage everyone to go check it out if you've never been there, and bring the kids. And your kids may have already been there though, because a lot of local kids end up from the local schools go over to the Shelburne Farms for one thing or another. So the photo archive I have here is the Shelburne Museum back from 2012, when we did their new center there, their education and exhibit center. And this is doing some of the roadway and pathway work around there with the USS Ticonderoga, or the SS, or whatever it would be, the Ticonderoga in the background, which is now a museum piece. I believe the farms would be in the far background there, but they are associated together because they were both the museum and the farm were kind of funded and created and thought of by the Webb family out there, who still are descendants. Their descendants are still running the places. So great place to check out. Good job on the work out there, and thank you, Susan. I'll let everybody go. Matt's still tied up with his audio problems, so have a good day out and be safe out there, and have a good weekend. And it's opening weekend of deer season, so good luck there and be safe.